Welcome to What Not to Do. I'm Kyle Schmidt, and this is episode 28. I've got Jay Guilford with me here. He was raised in Atlanta, found himself in New York City with Cirque du Soleil, and now he's in Vegas. He used to be a bully boss, and now he is the boss whisperer. Ask him what he wants, and he wants you to harness your superpower. You're going to love this conversation. Hold tight, and we'll be right back. All right, you want to know why? Well, I'll tell you why. My why is to use my presence and my prose to inspire you to go all in on you so that you live a legacy worth leaving. Again, to use my presence and my prose to inspire you to go all in on you so that you live a legacy worth leaving. And I want to inspire 1 billion people to live a legacy worth leaving by 2030. That's 10 years. That's 100 million people per year. So let's go. Join me in this mission to help equip the world for success and inspire 1 billion people to live a legacy worth leaving. Rock and roll. Well, I am here with Jay Guilford. He is a leadership strategist, which is awesome. We're going to unpack that in. But Jay, man, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Kyle.
Yeah, and when I say here, it's really cool. We were talking off air a little bit about how technology is levels the playing field. It decentralizes things to where you and I would rather be hanging out in person having this conversation. Yet we can be miles away. You're all the way in Las Vegas, Nevada, right? I'm up in Greenville, Wisconsin. Temperatures are probably the same, right? But but we can be here having a conversation, right? Actually, it's a balmy 43 degrees here today, which is on the warmer side, which is great. But anyway,
65 awesome, in Las Vegas and sunny.
Yeah. Nice. Well, man, you probably will share this at the time of this recording. You're probably going to share this with your network when it drops, when your story comes out in the world. But my guess is that there's a lot of folks who have no idea who Jay Guilford is. They might not even know what a leadership strategist is. So, man, I would love to hear more about who you are and what it is exactly that you do. Who's Jay?
I don't know what a leadership strategist is either. I'm still figuring it out. No, actually, it's interesting. I just recorded a podcast earlier this morning with someone in India, and they'd said, "Why do you call yourself leadership strategist?" And I was like, because there has to be a system around leadership and soft skills. So I'll start with that. A leadership strategist is really a person who comes in and looks at an organization and creates systems to hold people accountable for developing soft skills. Cool. I use data. Like I say our team at Coworks, we use hard data to help people learn soft skills. Yeah. And I've worked with a lot of the big Fortune 500 companies while I was at Cirque, and I've worked with a lot of them independently. So that's kind of our signature approach. Jay Guilford, who am I? I'm the guy on LinkedIn posting all that stuff that everyone's eating up, right? I would say I'm right now, I'm a person in transition. I would say, and we're going to talk about this later, I'm a former bully boss. I'm a former reformed bully boss.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
Yeah, and live in Las Vegas. Probably the shiniest thing on my professional resume is that I worked with a bunch of clowns. Literally, I worked at Cirque du Soleil for 6.5 years. And part of my job for the first half was managing our at-risk youth programs throughout the United States. And the second part of my job was leading the development of our corporate training programs, where we worked across the shows and brought teams in to do crazy stuff on the stage with our artists to learn valuable lessons.
Man, you probably have some awesome stories.
I have 4 stories.
Right. That's awesome. That's so cool. Yeah. So where do you hail from? Are you born and raised in Las Vegas, or where do you come from? And what do you love to do when you're not helping companies just to develop their leadership strategies?
I am from Atlanta, Georgia. I lived in New York City. I did 8 years in New York, so I kind of got that under my belt, which is a whole other thing. And I've lived in 5 cities, Las Vegas being the last. I think I'm going to be here for a while.
Cool.
And when I'm not helping, I'm addicted to kind of these projects I'm in right now. So as I told you, this is the second podcast I'm recording today. There's a third. I had another conversation about a third I'll be recording. I'm what people call a workaholic. When I'm not working, I'm an avid jogger. So I love jogging. I love treadmills, surprisingly. So I jog on treadmills a lot. And though I'm lactose intolerant, I love ice cream.
Come on.
So I also eat a lot of ice cream and take a lot of lactate pills. So when I'm not doing this, I'm jogging and I'm jogging off the ice cream.
The lactate pills, those are a real thing. Those are,
that's
a friend back in the day, she needed lactate pills. That's awesome.
Thing.
What's your favorite flavor?
Oh, please. Haagen-Dazs. And I know people are like, well, it's not from Europe. I don't care. Haagen-Dazs, vanilla Swiss almond. I'm going to get some of that right after we finish this.
Nice. Come on. That's awesome. There's a place in Wisconsin in the Madison area that makes really, really good ice cream. And their logo is like a circle, and it's like a pink circle with like a face of a cow and then a green outer circle. I never know the name of the company, but they make some of the best ice cream I've ever had. And they've got this flavor called Exhausted Parent.
That's a good one.
So it's espresso flavored ice cream with dark chocolate chunks in it, and it's infused with bourbon, which is awesome.
Wow, yeah, wow, that's interesting. Yeah, wow.
Yeah. Well, that's so cool, man. So so Atlanta. I lived in Birmingham for a little bit, so a little bit of a filler. We took a few trips out to Atlanta, but I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't miss the Atlanta traffic. That's a real thing.
It's a real thing. It's the second most congested city, or in terms of traffic in the U.S., I think right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Crazy. And New York City, it's awesome. I've got a little sister that's out there. She's in the music theater world and doing that, which is really, really cool. So, and then Nevada, man, cool space, no income tax, right? No state income tax, which is awesome.
That's the thing. Yep.
That's so cool. Well, good. So like you have some fun stuff on your resume, and, I'm sure our listeners are probably like, man, like, how do you work for, Cirque du Soleil? You're working with Fortune 500 companies. You're helping to cultivate human capital within major organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us a little bit about how you got to be where you are today. Did you always have this love of wanting to help develop people and teams or like kind of walk us through, get us inside Jay's mind, and how did you get to where you are today?
Well, I have a kind of cliche story that I think might also be interesting for people to show the distance between where I was and where I am now. I grew up, I'm a Black American person, and I grew up in Atlanta during the height of the crack epidemic. So, and for large parts of my teenage years, I lived with my aunt in housing projects. And I remember having mentors, and this is not a sob story, I'm not playing a violin. I had mentors who along the way pointed out the way and showed me that there were things different from what I was living. Wow. So I remember one teacher, Miss Jackson, who I could say now she was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Then I loathed her because she just told me that I had to do all these sets of things, and she would require me to apply to this thing and to do this science fair and to, stay after school. I remember once my sophomore year, she wanted me to do applications for a summer program. And I told Miss Jackson, I said, I don't have a typewriter at home. That was back during the days of typewriters and early computers. And she said, well, I talked to the janitor and they're going to leave the computer lab open for you as long as you want. And I said, well, Miss Jackson, how am I going to get home? She said, well, you're going to walk. And it was probably literally, no joke, it had to be at least 3 miles from Krim High School to East Lake Meadows, where my aunt was living. And I walked. And that level of tenacity she helped me develop in that early stage really paid off. So I went from there, got a scholarship to Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia.
Awesome.
Did my undergrad at Emory, moved to New York, did some stuff there, did my graduate work at Columbia University, their graduate school of education. And then through a series of fortunate events, I found my way to Cirque du Soleil. And I didn't know what Cirque du Soleil was. I had no idea what it was. I had done some work with them as a consultant. I dropped in, didn't know what it was. And then they offered me a job, and I was like, I don't know. And I kind of went back and forth with them. And then a friend tapped me on the shoulder and said, this is kind of a big deal. You may want to reconsider. And then at that point, I was in Guadalajara. I was going to live in Guadalajara because I was a vagabond and, I didn't have a care in the world. And I Skyped in my interview, with the global director of blah, 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 or something big. I just Skyped it in and I moved to Vegas sight unseen. And
awesome.
Here we are now.
Here you are now. That's so cool. And we'll probably get into this like a little as you unpack your story here. But I mean, the power of someone to come along and cast a vision of yourself that's greater than you ever thought possible.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, it's just so powerful, man. That's so cool. And the way that Miss Jackson pushed you, encouraged you, didn't give you other options, almost didn't give you a way out. You will do this. Right. Yes. It's just so awesome, man. What a gift.
I remember I was in her homeroom my sophomore year. And I remember she was my science teacher. And I remember her telling me that there was a fair, a science fair and a social science fair. And she told me that I had to enter both. And I was like, well, she said, in order to get an A in her class, I had to enter both. I was like, well, no, I don't. She said, well, I talked to your social science teacher and I've told her that this is the requirement. And it was, I hated her, I was like 16 and I didn't know. And at the same time, she understood that coming from the environment and the background that I came from, it was necessary for me to run more laps in order to be ready for the race. Yeah.
And that Atlanta humidity is that's no joke,
It's not at all. Yeah, not at all. No.
Is that where you developed your love of jogging?
Yeah, I did. I would jog. I can't do this now, I don't think, but I would jog out in 95-degree weather. It didn't feel like anything to me, So I can, I'm still pretty good, but I can't do that. I'm not 23 anymore.
Right. Oh yeah, so good, man. I love the heat up in Green Bay. We get all seasons, which is great, and it actually does get pretty humid up here. People might not realize that, but just not as long of a stretch, as what you guys are having in the South. What I experienced in Birmingham, and what's probably true for you guys in Atlanta. That's awesome. Very, very cool. Side note, total tangent, but barbecue. Come on, man! Like so good down there.
Yeah.
It's just awesome. Yeah. Do you have like a favorite? Are you a barbecue guy, or do you have a favorite kind of food that you love or you miss?
Let me see. Ice cream. It's just I eat ice cream everywhere I go. Everywhere I travel, I find the local ice cream. I eat the ice cream from the South. There was a thing that we had when I was younger. I don't know if you know what it is. It's called crackling bread.
No,
you know this?
No.
Well, it's cornbread with baked in pork rinds.
Come on. Oh.
Yeah, that sounds healthy, right? It's really good. Oh man, my grandfather would make it. It is amazing. Crackling bread.
Oh, yeah, you're sprechen my Deutsch. That's awesome. That's delicious. So, okay, let's get a little tactical here. Help our listeners understand what does a day in the life of Jay Guilford actually look like? What is it actually that you do? And let's say someone was listening, they're the president or CEO of a company, and they might actually be interested in bringing you in to work with them. Like, how would you talk about what you actually do, the value there, or even for someone that might say like, hey, like, man, I really kind of like a little bit of what he's talking about. Maybe that could be a good fit for me for a career, and a path, a trajectory in life. Yeah. Tell us, let's get a little bit deeper there. What do you do?
So, well, I would say what I do first of all is my kind of nickname. People have called me the boss whisperer. So like the horse whisperer, because I've developed the skill and I've been trained to learn to say things that seem difficult or unpopular in ways that senior executives and teams can hear. So I'm brought in as a third party to unpack what the challenge is in organizations and to help people understand the challenge and to change their behavior to become accountable. So a day for me looks kind of like I might have a coaching call with someone I'm working with independently during the day. And we have strategies that we've been working on, for a month, 2 months, 3 months, get an update. They tell me what's going on. And then I then I counsel them about, we generate ideas about what to do next. I don't usually prescribe. Sometimes I do, but often we co-generate ideas. So I might have a coaching call during the day. Then I might have a strategy meeting with an organization. Like right now I'm working with an organization in Las Vegas, and we're developing their entire leadership program for 2020. So I'll meet with the SVP of Human Resources and discuss a strategy for that. And then I may go to the gym, and then I'm working on a books. I'll do some writing, and then somewhere in there during the week is some type of workshop with the team.
Yeah, and plenty of ice cream scattered throughout there, right?
There's ice cream. There's going to be ice cream. I told you in about an hour. Yeah.
Hey, this is Kyle. Well done on your decision today to be great. Those are my kiddos in the background. Hey, if you want more of this kind of content, find me on social media. We'll keep the conversation going. You can hit me up on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, at StartWithWNTD. Again, at StartWithWNTD. We'll see you there.
That's awesome. So the Boss Whisperer, that's so cool, man. That's really interesting. Yeah. And you shared off air, but a lot of you're drawing from your experience basically in your work. You had a bit of a turning point in your own career, having been a boss, having made some mistakes we'll get into in just a little bit. But you're drawing quite a bit from not only from, maybe the better way to say it is what makes you good at what you do. Why are you the Boss Whisperer? Well, because you've been the boss before, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I in a lot of ways, and I'll talk about the mistakes later, and there are lots. Most recently, the thing that stretched my professional growth a lot was working at Cirque du Soleil and working across all 7 shows in Las Vegas, working with Montreal, working client-facing with Google, Uber, Microsoft, MasterCard, Adobe, and then working in the office. So they're all different cultures. So I had to kind of drop into shows and to give directions to teams of lighting and riggers and contortionists across 7 shows. So each show had its own culture. And then I was working with clients who had their own culture, and the office had its own culture. So yeah, I would say I had to go in and lead lots of teams who had lots of different cultures. And that really forced me to reconsider the ways that I was communicating, the ways that I was collaborating, and the types of language and messages I was using. Because all things being equal, it didn't matter if I thought it was wrong the way that this person was doing it. I was the only common denominator, so I had to change myself.
Yeah. You mean people should adapt to you?
Well, I tell leaders this all of the time. It's much easier for you to adapt to the 20, 40, or 80 people you're leading than for you to ask all 80 individually to change. It's just quicker, Yeah,
that's so good. All right, man. So that's really cool. So let's pull the curtain back a little bit further and ask why. Like, why do you keep waking up every morning, Las Vegas, Nevada, and giving your life to really helping, deep and good quantitative but qualitative change in organizations from a leadership perspective? Why give your life to that work? What's the greater purpose or vision that's driving you?
Well, there's a couple of reasons why. One is I've had the great fortune of working with organizations from around the world. And I've seen what does work and I've seen what doesn't. So I have the benefit of pattern recognition. And part of that is just I'm super interested in the patterns of organizations. Another more personal part is that when I was 23, I became a director of summer interns. And I made lots of mistakes. So I can now see, as I was a former bully boss, and I can see all of the emotional body bags that I left because I lacked training. And I can see how I became better when I got mentorship from Giselle Italian and got training at Columbia University and in other places. So one, I've seen great organizations work really well, and I want to Robin Hood that stuff to other organizations. And 2, I was a bad boss, and I had the benefit of people being patient and training me and getting the direct feedback. So, and the other thing and I'm going to ask you this, and I think the other thing is that people don't enjoy work. And I think work can be enjoyable because we're going to spend 96,000 hours at work. So it should be enjoyable. When I go, I'm I talk to everyone, and my friends are like, "Oh, you talk to everyone." But when I go to check out, I ask people like, "How's your day going?" And I really ask because I really am just nosy, and I kind of want to know. And then mostly what they say is, "It's almost over. I have 2 more hours to go." So I've seen that in work environments, people are counting down the hours of their life because they don't want to be there. And I have the benefit of having a profession that I'm truly engaged in. Like I'm up at 2 a.m. doing things because it's not work. I'm just engaged in the projects. So you can just see on a personal level, like when you go out, Kyle, ask someone, "How's your day going?" When you're checking out, they're going to probably say, "Almost over. I have 2 more hours." So I think that it's an epidemic that work is not enjoyable and that work is not engaging. So those are all the reasons why I do what I do.
Yeah. Oh, I'm a sociable man such as yourself, and I couldn't agree more. As soon as you said that, I was like, yeah, I don't know that anyone's given me a different answer in my life, or at least an answer that was so different that actually stood out. Right? Everyone's like, I'm almost out of here. An hour left, 2 hours left, or I just got here. Right? As if they're already counting down the minutes
to their life.
Yeah, to their life. Right? Exactly. Man, that's awesome. I mean, I think that work is so needed in our day and age. I think somewhere along the way, you remember when we were 5 years old, it's like we could take on the world, we could conquer it, like we were invincible. And somewhere between 5 and 25, we lost that. We lost the ability to think big, to dream big, to go and execute, to go conquer, take on, right? It was never about staying inside your bedroom and playing. It was always about the world outside. Let's go get it, right?
Exactly.
And sometime between 5 and 25, that's been taken from us, right? And so we go to school, for 18 years, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 to live for the weekends. Then we go to college for another 4 years, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 to live for the weekends. And then we finally find a job that we maybe didn't choose, a path that was, chosen for us, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And what are we doing? We're living for the weekends. We're counting down our lives. Exactly. And it's kind of like, man, like life is so much more than that, right? Exactly. And it seems you're really giving people another choice. You're showing them another option in life. Life doesn't have to be like that, right? Life could be like this.
Yes. And I think that when I look at those work environments, it is partly that we have the assumption that work should not be enjoyable. Like it's something that you have to literally labor through.
Right.
And when I tell people I want to make work enjoyable, I want to make teams engaging, I want to create non-toxic work environments, some people who elect my services understand, yes, they're trying to do that too. Some other people, including friends, think it's ridiculous. Like that's just a part of what it is. What if it's not? Like it used to be a part of what it is for people to throw aluminum cans away. It's no longer the case. Whether recycling works or not, that's a different subject. People are actually recycling. So we have seen changes and revolutions in the way that we are as a culture. I think that I want to start a work revolution where people are engaged no matter what you're doing. I worked at the Container Store for years in New York when I had 7 jobs and I was trying to pay New York rent. And I enjoyed it because it was a job that I enjoyed because I like organizing things. I like learning about products, and I enjoyed it, and they made it enjoyable. So,
yeah. Oh man, that's so good. I love what you said. How much in life do we just go through life and we say, well, that's just how it is. There's not another way.
Yeah.
And you say, but what if it's not?
Yeah.
But what if it's not? Like, how many folks in life, whoever had someone come up to them and say, well, okay, are you happy? And they say, nah, say, okay, well, what if you could find something that you enjoy doing, that you're good at doing, and you can make money doing, right? What if we could find something that hit all 3 areas and found your sweet spot, right? And that's what you're describing. It's not that, in your life, being up at 2 a.m. and working on projects, that every little last thing about that is, super enjoyable. And that's just where you get your kicks and giggles from. But you're so engaged in the work and the greater purpose, and you love doing it that you want to be up at 2 a.m. to finish it. Right.
Exactly.
And you love it from that perspective. You enjoy what you do. You're good at what you do. And the world is compensating you for doing what you're doing because you're giving more to the world in use value than what you're taking from them in cash value. And it's an amazing thing. And that's life-giving. And how many people can step back from what they do and say that's what I do?
Exactly.
And I think you just get crickets. I think you just get silence. And I love it, man. I would love to see that revolution happen, man.
It's happening now. We're doing it here.
Come on.
This is the part of it. Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually at the heart of this podcast, right? Folks that either, they sense that there's more in life. They've maybe somewhere lost their way. They're faced with a situation where they feel like they're in the middle of an ocean. They can swim 360 different directions, but they have no idea where to go. And so those options that are a symbol of freedom now become chains and cause them to drown, right? Exactly. And it's saying, it's connecting. It's, I get the joy of kind of connecting or brokering conversations like this with you that can help inspire other people to go further, faster, to build something greater in life than something just for themselves, but for the world and for a greater legacy than just, their time on this earth. And I love it, man. So you were speaking the same language here, it seems. So.
We're in sync.
I love it. All right. So let's pivot. You've had some awesome success in life, which is really, really cool. You wouldn't have had that if you did everything wrong, right? And even though this is a show talking about our failures, we leaning into a few of those to help others. I think it's always important to start and celebrate some of what we did right. So as you look back over the course of your life to date, what are a few things that really stick out to you that were right decisions, right choices, things that you did right that really helped to achieve the success that you experienced so far?
What did I do right? I maybe have done two things right. So let me figure. So I do remember, like I said, I grew up in Atlanta. People, statistically in the US, we were poor. Like my father was a janitor. My mother worked in a fast food restaurant. So statistically on paper, we were poor. We had most of the stuff that we needed. And I remember walking down a sidewalk I walked down every day and looking down at the particular patterns of cracks on the sidewalk and thinking, one day I will never see this sidewalk again. And early on, I listened to my inner voice that said that there's a world beyond this. And that inner voice told me after I graduated college to move to Massachusetts. That inner voice told me to move to New York City. That inner voice told me to move to San Francisco. And I didn't know it then, but one thing that was successful for me is listening to the inner voice that says, that is pure instinct, that's pure guidance, and following that instinct. At the time, it didn't seem logical, or there didn't seem to be a pattern to all the things that I did. And for most of that time, I was broke and I was struggling, and I, wore hand-me-down cut-off shorts. Not that there's anything wrong with it. That's what I was wearing. Yeah. There was no financial success to that. Yep. I'd always craved a level of freedom, and I listened to that above everything. And all of those experiences led me to run away with Cirque du Soleil. And all of those experiences led me to the Ubers and Googles and Genslers and, Microsofts of the world.
Hey, thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, and only if you think the show deserves it, would you go over to Apple Podcasts and give us an honest, thoughtful 5-star review? This will really help us in our mission to equip the world for success.
So one thing I would say is listening to the inner voice was very important. The other thing that is just baked into my personality is I am direct and assertive, and I speak up. So I have been in situations in corporate work environments that have been uncomfortable. And I've had, even before I became a leadership strategist, I worked for people who were my friends and people who weren't. And I've been in situations that have been uncomfortable and contentious. And I've stood up and said, no, actually, I'm the expert, and according to the data, this is what's best to do. I can give you a very specific example. We were launching Cirque du Soleil's corporate training programs, and early on, we had a super big tech company come to us, and they said, we liked the program, or we were like, great. And they had, through a series of, something happened, and they lost their budget, and they still wanted the program. And some of my team members were concerned. I said, we're going to do this at cost because we're going to get this payoff. It was a huge deal. It involved many divisions from different parts of the company and different parts of the world. And fortunately, people trusted me. It was not a popular decision. It paid off in the long run. So I've been able to exercise a high level of assertiveness, which is distinct to my work style and personality. So I would say listening to the inner voice, speaking up for what I feel is right according to the data, my expertise, and my instincts.
Yeah. Yeah. That's important. It's, I can't, It's like you tell someone to be direct and assertive and to speak up, and they turn into Thor. They whip out their hammer and they start smashing everything.
Exactly.
You know?
And I have done that before. I do not do that now. I did that before. Yep.
And so I imagine that, when you talk about being direct and assertive and speaking up, and you also combine that with being the boss whisperer, that there's a way in which, according to the person and their personality and whatever audience you're speaking to, there's a way to be direct and assertive to speak up that's really, really effective. And there's a way that might actually leave things worse than what they began. Would you agree with that? Or is it kind of just like,
I want to, there's a couple of things about that. I do agree. So what I use a lot of data. One thing that I use is predictive index. So I can go in, I don't know if you're familiar with this. It's a behavioral, it's a behavioral assessment. I can go in and understand people's work styles and how best they should be communicated to and managed. Yep. So I work backwards from that data. The other thing about speaking out and speaking up is that there will be a period of unpopularity. That's part of it. So when I train leaders, I say, okay, you have to give feedback to your direct reports. They are probably going to go away and talk about you because that's how they process it. That's a part of the process. And that discomfort about hurting people's feelings or how they feel or being unpopular can keep leaders from speaking out. And I train leaders. Well, what if they talk about me? I can promise you they are going to do that. They are going to leave and go to lunch together and talk about you for about 2 weeks, and then it'll be over. So learning to speak out. There's a specific way I do it. I use transformative mediation and data so that I can do it as candidly as compassionately as possible. And then also there's just sometimes a period of unpopularity when people hear things that are challenging. Yeah.
So that's the other side, that it takes a good dose of courage to actually be assertive, to speak up, to say what you know to be true. Yes. And my guess is that a lot of people will probably wrestle more with the fear side of things and being too afraid to speak up because maybe they don't want to be seen as arrogant or prideful. But I actually look at it maybe from this perspective that I think it's actually one of the most humble things you can do if you have the truth to actually share it. Now, again, there's a way in which you can do that can just destroy things and hurt relationships and environments, whatever. But it also can be one of the most constructive things you can do for that environment. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It could rub people the wrong way, make people feel uncomfortable. But hey, here's some friction we can grow. We've got traction. We can take it there. And instead of looking at it as something we should be afraid of, it's something we should try to lean into, right? How would you talk about it? How do you think about that?
Well, I just ran into statistics from Vital Stats that was published in the Harvard Business Review, and they polled 1,300 workers, and they asked, does your boss have a fault? And about 1,000 of them, 80% of people responded saying yes. My boss has a fault. Everyone knows it. We're all talking about it, and no one's telling the boss. So, and that's 80% of people are saying that they see the leadership spinach on their boss's teeth, and yet they're not pointing it out. And there are lots of reasons why. And there's fear and intimidation, and there's a hierarchy in the org chart. So I do think you're right. Fear is a key component of why people don't speak out to leaders. Wanting to be popular is a key component of why leaders don't speak out to direct reports. And what I refocus people on is the business goal. So if it's best for the business goal, then it's your job to do it. Yeah. So if your boss is intimidating and their intimidation is keeping people from speaking out and giving ideas at meetings that will serve the client best, then your business goal is to serve the client best. So you have to talk about that intimidation. So it's not taking it away from a moral stance or this is right, this is wrong. It's like, what's best for the business goal? And I'll give you the reverse, Kyle. Some people would argue that for Uber, it was best for the business goal for them to break all the laws and to pay the hundreds of millions of dollars in fines because they disrupted the cab industry across the world. So maybe that was best for the business goal. So what's right may not always be best. I'm not saying I agree with what Uber did or disagree with what Uber did. I'm saying keeping your eye focused on the business goal is the best North Star for feedback and anything you do at work.
Yeah, totally agree. And man, it seems like, well, you would know better than I. How common how common is it that you walk into a company or just experience this kind of open uh, dialogue, transparent, kind of raw feedback and dialogue within companies? Is that a common thing? Is it a rare thing?
I would say it's fairly rare for individuals to feel comfortable speaking out because we're biologically wired to feel like giving negative feedback is danger. It hijacks our amygdala. It feels like we're being chased by a tiger when we face a situation where we have to give negative feedback. So it's biologically natural to avoid it. I have the great fortune of working with companies. When they elect me, they're asking for that. They're asking for it. I should say, when you call me up, folks, you're asking for it. So at the point at which you call someone like me, then you want to give that feedback. So for example, I have a person that I'm coaching there in Singapore, and they work for a large tech firm there. And they have gotten explicit feedback. And they were like, wow, this is hard. I was like, yeah, well, that's a great culture. And they're like, I didn't want to hear that. I was like, and you needed to hear that. So it's rare only because we need to be trained to do it.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. That's so interesting. Yeah. And you're the tiger that's coming in, right? You're the tiger that's doing the chase today.
Yeah. And not even the tiger. I think what's interesting about bringing in any third party is that what's great about me or anyone else you bring in is that the consultant has no skin in the game. So they can go in and say things on all levels and not fear retaliation. So it's, you can just go in and say the thing. So that if you have an organization that has challenges with feedback or conflict, a third party is great because they can model what needs to happen and then hold people accountable for it.
Yeah. You can put the bombs on the ship and then walk off.
Yeah. Or the flowers, or the incense, or the candles. Yeah. I know what you're saying, though. It does feel like a bomb. Yeah, I know what you're saying. It does feel like a bomb. Yeah.
I mean, that's so good. And exactly right. Like when you've got two parties, whether it's personally or professionally, that can't talk, a mediator is huge. And you're helping to have that conversation. Are you familiar with Ray Dalio?
I am now. Tell me, Ray Dalio. I've heard his name, but I should probably.
He's was it a hedge fund manager? I think he is a billionaire, but he runs a company. Has a book called Principles. Highly recommend it. But in his company, they're a big fan of data analytics and what he calls creating a culture of radical transparency.
Yeah.
And what they'll actually do as, and his team is not very big. It might just be like 30 folks, but they'll actually all get into one room and they'll go through a process where they'll actually grade one another. Right. And they'll use data, and that kind of real-time feedback analytics to measure what the best idea is, or if this was a good idea. And no one takes it personally. It's just like, hey, we're going to objectively do this, try to set our emotions aside. And by being able to kind of, in a good way and in a positive sense, argue with each other or debate with each other, we can get to the best idea that's going to be best, like you said, for the business goal. He's kind of creating that kind of culture, which is really, really cool and inspiring. And I can imagine if that's not embraced from a top-down perspective in an organization, that can be really, really hard to cultivate.
Yes. Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah. I think that you hit the nail on the head. I don't think it necessarily has to come from the top. I think it helps if it does, because people have buy-in and they can see the leader modeling the culture. Cultures can be changed from the inside out. I think the Me Too movement is very powerful because it shows that you don't have to be the leader or the majority in terms of your identity to change the culture. And I think the Me Too movement is changing the world. So, it does help if the C-suite or the owners get on board. It does.
All right, man. Well, let's flip the script here. You haven't done everything right in life, I'm going to guess, because you're human. You bleed the same as I do. So talk to me, man, as you kind of look back over the course of your career to date. What are a few, 1, 2, maybe 3 failures that kind of rise to the top of the mind, stand out above the rest and say, man, if I could just have this one back, or that you would readily tell someone else, hey, don't do this.
Yes.
What would those be for you, Jay?
I would say, do you want me to list all three or talk about each individually? Because I have 20 that I could talk about. I have three top failures for Jay Guilford.
Let's do one at a time, and why don't you unpack each one of those for us?
All right, I want to know who's next. Who do you want to hear on what not to do? Which entrepreneur, which leader, which public figure in your network do you want to hear on the show? Maybe it's you. Maybe you need to be here. So let's connect me with whomever, and we'll sit down for coffee, a beer, or even a cigar, and together equip the world for success.
Well, the first is using intimidation as a form of leadership, or using intimidation as a leadership or management tool. And that happened to me early in my career when I asked for the position as director at a summer internship program, and I got the position as director. I eventually got the leadership training with that position. Again, my personality, my predictive index profile, if you look at it, is that I'm a promoter. I'm very out there. I'm very in people's face. I'm very assertive. That translated into me as a 23-year-old. Some of the interns were my age, and some of the teachers that I was also managing were older than me. So I just used fear and intimidation to get them in line. I would say things like, I had a more of a Amanda Presley Devil Wears Prada style. I wasn't loud. I was very cool. And I would say things to the interns like, I don't care how you feel. I need you to go and do your job now. And so and now I look back, I'm like, that's hugely intimidating. So I didn't have other tools in my toolbox, and that's what I relied on. And I would tell leaders, don't do that. Don't do that in your first stint as a leader, or in any stint as a leader.
Yeah, that's good. And do you think that's common or easy for a younger leader to fall into?
Yes, because I feel like people are told things like take back your power or stand up for yourself, or you need to be the authoritarian. We don't unpack what that really means. So yeah, don't be weak. I was coaching a senior director in an organization, and I asked them to send out an email of apology to their team. I actually sat with them. I said, we're going to type this email and let's send it out. And they said, well, this is going to feel weak. And I asked them, does it feel easy to send this email? And then they said no. And I said, so would it be strength to push this bar up and send this email, or would it be weakness? And we have to really unpack and redefine what that means. So yes, I think we're taught lots of conflicting things about what leadership is. So yeah, any leader can fall prey to that.
Yeah, for sure. That's so good. And even thinking that, if I'm the authority, if I'm the leader here, it means I need to be the biggest and the strongest, and
exactly.
And everyone needs to fit underneath my umbrella. Rather than your strength might be measured by how far you can help others go. Exactly. And that's a really powerful thing when a leader does take, I think one of the most powerful things anyone can do, but especially for leaders, is to assume total ownership. And if that's for an issue, especially an area where you made a mistake or went wrong, hey, one of the best things you can do, one of the strongest things you can do.
It's I think that's interesting when you look at Myers-Briggs, the breakdown. It's about 50-50 between introverts and extroverts as leaders. So it's not necessarily that the biggest personality is always the leader. We think that, and in the US, we really have a heroic model of leadership. As opposed to a collective model or a vulnerability model. Yeah,
that's good. Awesome, man. So don't use intimidation as a leadership tool or tactic. It's not going to go well for you. What's the next one? What do you got?
The other is the second thing that I did that I've changed as I got older is I used to prioritize other people's opinions over what was best for me. So, and that's more of a life lesson and sort of a leadership lesson, but also a life lesson. I remember being in New York and staying there because I felt that it was important that I kept my Upper West Side doorman apartment, even though I was struggling to pay for it. And, I was a writer living in New York, and I really cared more about the poster I was putting up for other people as opposed to the reality of my life. And you see that a lot on social media. People are putting up posters for their life instead of creating the reality that they really want. And I did that for years.
Yeah. Man, that's actually so powerful. We love to Photoshop our failures, right? Photoshop our life, have our Instagram face on, our Facebook face on. And it's easy how we can, with the click of a button, exactly like you said, we can make someone think we have the life that we wish we had, but aren't anywhere near having.
Exactly.
And we might fool the world for a time, but man, we're not fooling ourselves.
You're not. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And if we can have, I don't rail against social media because I think it's done a lot of amazing things.
Yeah. Great tool.
And it's like any tool. It's like fire. You can use it to cook or you can use it to burn. And my engagement, I've learned to have my engagement with social media be genuine and about something I really want to say or offer to people, or I really just want to brag. It's like, this is just a brag post. And that's all of that's fine if you understand your intention.
Yeah.
Around it, that you won't be ambushed by the repercussions of those intentions.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. That's so good. Yeah. So don't prize other people's opinions over what's best for you. There's a phrase, that I recently have come across, and I love it. I've been overusing it, but I love it. A lot of people in life say you should do this and you should do that and you should do this and you should do that. And it's just like people love to should on us, right?
Oh, I can take that.
They should all over us. It's kind of like, it kind of goes hand in hand with this idea that the most closed-minded people are the most open-mouthed. It's so easy that everyone's going to want to tell us what we should do. Everyone's going to have an opinion. I think it gets really tough when there's actually people that we really respect and admire, and they give us their opinion. And maybe it's not what's best for us, right? And that takes a bit of courage to say, "Hey, thank you so much for that," and then to go do what is best for you. That's challenging, man. But I agree. We need to deeply know and embrace what's best for us. Receive wisdom and ideas from other folks and feedback. But at the end of the day, we need to not prize other people's opinions over what we know to be best for us.
Exactly. And it's also like if you equate it to anything else that happens with us biologically, we know when we're hungry, we know when we're tired, we know when we're thirsty, as long as we know to listen to our bodies. At the same time, we have the intuition to know how we should best move through the world. Yeah. When I sit down with myself, I know for a fact that I am much more comfortable in my life right now living in Nevada than I am living in New York City. I love both places. And I also know that I stayed in New York City for longer than I should because it was sexy. It looked shiny to me. I have a great relationship with Cirque du Soleil. I have a great relationship with Cirque du Soleil. And I left on my own accord because what was best for me was to move into this larger sphere of influence. So at the time, the head of HR is a close friend of mine. And at the time, when I slid my letter across of resignation, she said, "Are you sure?" I was like, "Yeah, because there's these other sets of things that I need to do." And what was interesting about that, it was the New York situation. It is Cirque du Soleil. It is sexy. Whenever I got on a plane to go somewhere, all I had to do was say, I work for Cirque du Soleil. And it gave me this level of cachet and influence. And I realized that what I want to do is help leaders be better all around the world in lots of ways. I did it well at the circus. I needed a different sphere. So listening to that inner voice, and it sometimes can be counterintuitive, and sitting down with yourself and saying, what do I really want to do? And that might be different than how I want people to think of me. Those are sometimes two different things.
Yeah. And that's challenging. And it's, Simon Sinek talks about that in his book, Start With Why, is the limbic brain, right? And what we would maybe call our gut, right? Our intuition. And it's not a bug; it's a feature, right?
Exactly.
Our gut, that gut feeling we get, it's a built-in feature, not a bug. We shouldn't ignore that. It's not the only variable in the situation, but it's a big one, and we shouldn't ignore that, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Number 3. Do you have 3 failures?
I have. I will stop at 3. I have 10, so we'll stop at 3. The third one, and this is for me, and I've seen lots of other leaders do it, is avoidance. Like I spent a long time working to avoid the negative instead of focusing on the positive. So I tried to avoid what I didn't want to happen. And I avoided that. And I still for years didn't get what I wanted to happen. you know. So yeah, I just spent years of, I don't want to look this way. I don't want people to think this thing about me. I don't want to do this. I'm not going to do that. Like for years, I spent a large amount of my time avoiding a full-time job, which is, I was clear that I didn't want a full-time job. That's different from embracing work that gave me a lot of freedom.
Yeah.
And I had to get to the place where I could articulate what I did want. It's like, it's not that I don't want a full-time job. It's that I want work that allows me a lot of freedom and agency, and, you know, I would also say influence. So I often work on this with leaders. They have a I don't mentality. I've coached, I don't know, this year, maybe, I don't know how many, 50 people on this. I don't want my direct reports to think this. I don't want my boss to think this. I don't want this to happen. I'm like, okay, great. What do you want? Let's focus on, and let's go get that, because you can avoid the mountain, but still be in the desert. So let's get what you do want.
Yeah. Man, that's so good. It really plays on this deep principle in the world that we become what we behold. You know, the things that we focus on, we eventually become. The things that we love, we eventually become more like those things. And you're exactly right. It's like we think we're doing a good thing by saying, well, these aren't the things I don't want to be. You know, for instance, a lot of people say, well, I don't want to be like my parents. Well, guess what? If that's what you're focusing on your whole life, you're going to wake up 20 years from now and be exactly like your parents, right? And you're hitting on a really true thing to move from, hey, it's good to articulate what you don't want, great, but then move on from that, forget that. And now let's focus on what you do want, and make that the focus, make that desire, make that the vision, because that's what you're going to eventually become. You're going to constantly reinforce that behavior in your life and eventually become that, which will be a really, really good thing. That's important, man. And that's a careful distinction that it would be easy for a lot of folks to miss.
Yeah. And I would also add to that for me, I've embraced some parts of myself that are who I am that could have, in a different spin, some people have spun as negative. I've learned to use my superpower. One, I'm very assertive, and that's different from being intimidating or a bully. One, I'm super flashy. Like I walk in and you kind of know it's me. You kind of, and they would say, that's the guy from Cirque, because I probably had on, you know, a suit jacket with some leather pants. So
Come on,
you probably, so whatever parts of your personality that are your superpower, it can look like, if you have laser eyes, you can burn people with it, or you can save people with those eyes. So you understanding like what parts of your personality are natural and native, and embracing those. And again, I use data. I use a lot of data. I don't just tell leaders, you can just yell. I look at their predictive index and I say, oh, you're aggressive when challenged. That's literally a phrase that we can look at and say, oh, the data says you're this. How can you be assertive and not aggressive? So yeah, embracing the things that might not look like a superpower that people might paint as negative. That's really important too.
Oh yeah. That's so good, man. Yeah. Really, really powerful stuff.
Well, it is one of my main goals to give you more in use value than what I take from you in cash value. And so, man, I love that this podcast is for free. And I really hope that you are finding just incredible value. Who knows, maybe in one of these episodes, you'll take an idea that will be worth $1 million to you. And that's so awesome. If you believe in this and what we're doing here and you'd like to give, you can go to patreon.com/whatnottodo and you can give according to your heart's desire. But seriously, every little bit helps in our mission to equip the world for success. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Okay. So imagine you were counseling younger James, right?
Yep.
Or, you know, a guy who's come up to you and said, man, I love what you're doing. I could see myself doing what you do in life. Can I buy you a cup of coffee? Can we sit down and can you help me kind of get started? Give me some direction. You're going to probably tell them what you just told me and our listeners, you know, some of what you did right, some things that you did wrong so they can avoid those mistakes. How would you look back and tell younger James, what would you tell him to do differently? You know, either all the way back to the days in the ATL with Miss Jackson, or in New York City, or was it Guadalajara, or where?
Guadalajara. La ciudad de Guadalajara, Mexico. Yeah.
So, insert yourself into some various point in your past where younger James is there, and what would you tell him to do to help avoid maybe some of the failures that you experienced along the way?
Believe in yourself. I mean, that sounds so. Believe in yourself. Believe what's on paper and what other people say that are positive about you. I would say more importantly, throw away the imposter syndrome. Because for a long time, being a Black man from the inner city who migrated to the Ivy League, I felt like I had to stack up a lot of things on my resume in order to feel worthy of the things that were coming to me. And I want to be clear. Some of that was institutional. Some of that people may say was whatever it was. A lot of it was internal to me. So I felt like even after getting scholarships to 5 different universities, after going to Emory University, after going to Columbia University, after working with Cirque du Soleil, it only in the last, I would say, 8 years have I felt really, I know now that, now I just walk in and I say the things. I can walk into any corporation. I mean, I just now feel very confident about what I'm offering to others. That imposter syndrome can cripple you. So you can, I have a few other people that I coach and they will spend their whole life trying to get certification, whereas they already have the expertise. So understand your value and quickly believe in your own value. That's what I would tell myself.
Yeah, man, that's so important. It's we grow up in life and we are told and taught a certain narrative about ourselves. Exactly. And we end up believing it, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of what stunts that 5-year-old, from really, really going and acting on those big dreams, and suddenly he gets kind of tamed down and put into a box and said, "Hey, this is where you belong, right? And this is it." Rather than actually realizing at some point we have to wake up in life and hopefully we do realize, hey, there might be more than one narrative I could believe, right? Exactly. Or maybe some of it's true, but maybe it got twisted here, right? And that's what you're saying is you'd go back and say, man, believe in yourself. It's cliche for a reason, right? It's cliche for a reason. Believe in yourself, believe what's on the paper. Throw away the imposter syndrome. And what you're saying is that overwhelming weight or feeling of trying to be someone that we're actually not, and just be free to be who you are, to own it, and to know that that's one of the best gifts that you could give to the world.
Yes, that is true. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think we all need to hear that. And I mean, for our folks that are listening right now, maybe that's where you're at in life, right? Maybe something, Jay, that you just said will radically alter the course of one of our listeners right now. Yeah. And they needed to hear that from you. And you'll never meet them. You'll never see the fruit of that in your own life. But you can know and can dream that, man, they will go on to give the world a great gift because of your experience and your story and what you just said, which is awesome.
Yeah. And I just want to add to that, just as a specific example, I had been having some coaching conversations with a person who's high level in media, and something is changing in their company. And they said, well, I need to go back and take classes. And I'm like, no, you have worked with the largest entertainment companies in the world. There's no certification you need. Just know that you know enough to do it. Right. They're paying you a lot of money and you have all of these direct reports. So there's this church of the university and this church of certification that we can fall prey to, like understanding that we got it. Once you got it, you got it,
I love that phrase, church of the university.
Yeah, you can have it. It's copywritten. No, you can have it. You can have it. The church of the university. And what I love about now is that there are more billionaires under 40 than ever before. And a lot of them dropped out of college. And they've shown us that you need to know how to do things and produce something valuable. That's different from getting a certificate from a body. I'm not saying don't go to college. I mean, college, I learned well through reading and writing. So college was great for me because speaking, reading, and writing are my modalities. For a lot of, like I worked at Cirque. A college degree is not going to help you do a triple back on a type wire. So it's like we need to understand that there's a wider variety of talents, and understanding what our unique superpower is and tapping into that is important. I digress. Sorry, Kyle.
No, man, I love it. I love it. We could riff on that for hours, right? And maybe we're realizing that maybe part of that educational model or that path of maturity, or how we become equipped to go take on the world and to work in the world, maybe some of it's broken. Maybe it was good for a time, or maybe it's not the only option. Maybe it's a box that we've been put in that's not actually that's not a good one, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so I'm definitely not against going off to college and studying formally. At the same time, I see a lot of value in having a lot of different experiences. If people need to, in a sense, I kind of call it like a macro iteration with your life. Like a business would iterate, kind of constantly refine the product based off of market feedback, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do that fast and speedily to kind of get the best product rather than take 30 years to build out a perfect product and then realize no one wants it.
Exactly.
I think life is like that. I think we go through these iterations in life, and I think if we think we should just go to high school so we can go to college so we can get a good job and call that quits, I think we're missing a lot. I think there can be something you said about seeing life as an iterative process through which we are gaining some experience and some idea of, hey, what are we good at? What do we enjoy? And what are our economic opportunities? And then really going all in on those things. That's good. I love that. The church of the university.
Yeah, that's what I call it. Yeah, because I went to those churches.
Don't be a member at the church of the university.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, that's good. All right, so life is, life. We are inescapably influenced as we move throughout life, right? We are influenced by folks that we know, that we don't know. We are influenced, and we're conscious of it, and we're not conscious of it. The way that I like to talk about it is, it's like a rose, and the promise of that beautiful rose in full blossom is wrapped up in the seed, right? Mm-hmm. The potential, the promise, the capacity for it to become a rose, what it was meant to be, is wrapped up in the seed. And there's a lot of things that ultimately will dictate whether or not that happens, right? If the seed falls on blacktop, it's not going anywhere, right? If it gets planted in a garden but has disproportionate ratios of sun and rain, it's going to die. If the weed whacker comes along or the lawnmower and knocks it down, it's over, right? Yeah. And I think human life is like this. We have so much potential and capacity and promise wrapped up inside of us from birth. Yet our environments play such a factor in our development and growth in life. And I think people play a big part in that environment. Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious for you, all that to say, it's likely that you're probably shaped and influenced by a lot of people throughout your lifetime. But I'm curious for you, man, is there one that kind of rises to the top, head and shoulders above others, that if you took him or her out of the equation, you would not be the Jay Guilford that you are today?
Yeah, there too. I think first, I have a woman who's been a mentor of mine for probably over 20 years, Giselle Italian. And she was the woman who helped rectify my leadership style when I was working as a director of interns. So she was super patient and also very direct with me, gave me clear and explicit feedback, and chimed in on my life choices and said, well, that actually isn't best for you. You should do this instead. And because of her, I made much better choices, and I've grown exponentially professionally because I had a person that I trusted, which was her. And then at some point I learned just to do what she said, because she's lived a little longer than me. So one day I said, well, this is maybe over a decade ago. I said, well, you just tell me what to do for the next year. And I did all of the things. She said, take the job at Cirque du Soleil. I said, I don't want to take a job. She said, I know that. Leave Guadalajara and take the job. She said, stay there for 3 years. I said, I don't want to stay anywhere for 3 years. I just want to roam about and be free. And she said, I know that. And so her advice was counter to what I would have done, and it was helpful. Yeah. I think the second part of that is I have had a number of people when I've began to do things. Some people, because the ideas maybe seem too large, or they can't see it, or maybe they're intimidated by it for whatever reason, they've actively worked against me. And I don't think it was at me. I think it was more of a product of their feelings about themselves and their possibilities. That was helpful, actually, because when people give me advice and they're working against me, regardless of how they deliver the advice, I take the nugget of advice. If they say, well, that's so stupid that you're doing A, B, and C, and that's never going to work because D and F, I comb all of that away and say, oh, you're seeing a hole in my process. Thanks for pointing out that hole. I'm going to go and plug that. Yeah. So what I've learned more quickly to do is to take the negative feedback, regardless of how it's coming, and to take the seed out of that and to use that for my benefit. So, I mean, there are some challenges, when you say you're going to build a corporate team building program at a circus, that's not necessarily the first thing that comes to mind. And you can imagine that idea may not have been popular with everyone. So there are some challenges I had to overcome, and people gave me feedback that helped us actually improve the program. And even now in my work, I always ask for feedback after sessions, big major sessions, and I take the advice no matter how it comes. Yeah.
That can be tough to do, right? But I love how one of your answers for who had the most impact in your life was a collective of people that have given you negative feedback that you've removed your emotions from, taken constructively, objectively, and used it for your benefit to build, which is awesome. Yeah. It's tough to do.
Yeah, it's the reason why the negative feedback may be emotional for us is because some parts of it is true. It's not true that you can't do that. It's true that this part of it may not work. I'm still going to go do it. I'm still going to bring Google to Cirque du Soleil, and it did happen. Oh, what you're saying is I need to do this differently. So so take that advice and sweep away the other stuff.
Yeah, that's good, man. That's awesome.
Well, I'm really excited to share with you that What Not to Do has been gaining traction and momentum and experiencing some early wins, which is super exciting, and reminded me this show is about you, it's for you, and I couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much. If you're part of a company, if you own a company, and you think your message would be really, really relevant and valuable to the folks that are part of this community, entrepreneurs, leaders, public figures, and those aspiring as such, reach out to me. My contact info is in the show notes, and we can sit down and consider what it would look like to partner together in equipping the world for success.
All right. I could really care less about the best advice that you've ever been given.
Oh man.
I want to know, Jay, what's the worst advice that you hear floating around these days, or that maybe you were given sometime along the way?
Oh, the worst advice. Let's see. Oh God. I don't know if it's advice. It's just a thing that I hear lots of people saying when they're in work situations and there's conflict or there's bullying or there's intimidation or there's some toxic culture. I hear people saying to themselves, there's nothing I can do. And that phrase disheartens me because the only thing that we have control over in the workplace is ourselves. So I have an equation that I use for people. I say, you have the situation, plus you have yourself and whatever you're going to do, plus you have the policies, procedures, culture, and all of that. All of those things, the situation plus what you do, plus all of the policies and stuff, create the outcome. And if you're saying you can't do anything, then you're literally making yourself a zero in that equation. And I can understand in a toxic culture or in a work situation where it feels like nothing's going to change, I can understand how you can feel like you can't change the world. You can decide what you're going to do. So when I hear that, there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing I can do about it. There's always something you can do. Even if it's waking up 5 minutes earlier before you go to work and meditating, or even if it's, taking lunch away from the office outside, even if it's finding a colleague in a different department to get new ideas from, there is always something you can do. So not necessarily advice, it's just a phrase that I think is being recycled too much in workplace cultures, that victims are powerless. And I disagree with that. I've seen dramatic change when victims take back their own power.
Oh, that's so good. I've heard it said, and actually one of my favorite quotes, and if you ask my wife, she'd probably tell you that she's tired of hearing it.
Okay. I hope she's listening now.
She is.
Here we go.
She's one of my biggest fans. It goes like this. Life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how we react to it.
That's exactly.
And it's the idea that we are ultimately in charge of our attitude. And we can't always control what happens to us. So let's say, an unfortunate situation happens to us. In one real sense, we were preyed upon or a victim or whatever it might be, right? We were done
That's
wrong.
True.
We were done wrong or whatever it might be. Okay. How the rest of our life is going to go is how we choose to respond in that moment.
Exactly.
Right. And because if we respond poorly, guess what? We are going to ultimately create another really bad circumstance and situation that we are probably then going to likely respond poorly towards. And then we're gonna get ourselves in this vicious cycle of cause and effect, basically, because we're choosing to not take full ownership and full responsibility, even in tough situations when we didn't have control over initially what happened to us. And you're saying, just assume total ownership, take full control for your life, regardless of what happens, because you can control what happens next.
Yeah. And I think the reason why we like the rags to riches story, the reason why we reference Oprah all of the time is because it shows in some senses that, wow, you can decide differently and create a whole new reality for yourself. So we understand that when we look at MLK or Gandhi or Oprah, we have to find our own Oprahness. We have to tap into that.
Yeah. Oprahness. You have all these trademark phrases. I don't know.
I should write these down too.
Awesome, man. Well, so good. Last but not least, it's rush hour in every major city in the world, from Green Bay, Wisconsin to Las Vegas, Nevada to Beijing, and billions of people stuck in traffic. Probably not in Green Bay because we really don't have traffic. But I'm sure they're listening to this episode of What Not to Do with Jay Guilford, right? And because that's what you do on your commute. And wouldn't you know it, they stop and they look up and they see a billboard. And what do you know? It's Jay Guilford's billboard. Yes. What message do they see? What message do you want the world to see, Jay?
I would want them to see, interesting. I would want them to see, know your superpower. I guess I would say harness your superpower. Like, know that one thing that you do really well, or that one thing that's a gift to you, and start doing more of that. It's interesting. I think about like X Games and BMX biking. Like, that was a hobby 20 years ago. And now it's like probably $1 billion industry. It's hundreds of millions. And it was a hobby. Everything that's fodder can be a profession. So whatever your superpower is, understanding what that is and harnessing it is really key.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. And we talked earlier about technology being the, leveling the playing field. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a kid on YouTube. He's 7 years old. He reviews toys.
Yes.
For a living. He's made like $20 million in the past 3 years. Mm-hmm. I'm like, he's 7 years old. What is he good at? Playing with toys. What does he like to do? Playing with toys. Yeah. What's his economic opportunity? Playing with toys and talking about it on YouTube, right? And it's so unconventional, and maybe it's because it's not it's not the traditional business. I'm not in finance. I'm not in whatever it might be. Who cares? Like, what are you good at? What do you enjoy? And go find a way to make a living doing it. And it's freeing. It's awesome. Yes. It's super exciting. And I love that. Harness your superpower. It does. You initially said know your superpower. And so if you're going to harness it, you have to be aware, right? Be aware of what you're good at, right?
Identify it.
But then don't be afraid. Go and harness it and unleash it in good for the world, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Man. Oh, so good. All right. Bonus question. 3 books that you think should be on people's bookshelves that they should read sooner than later.
Oh, wow. There's 20. Here's 3. One would be Adam Grant's The Originals. It's full of lots of counterintuitive stories and anecdotes about leaders, things you don't think they faced. And they like the way that MLK wrote his speech, the I Have a Dream speech, last minute. And all the stuff that was around that. So I would say that's probably one of the best nonfiction books I've read. The second is Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. I just read that. She said this thing that was great in the book, and I totally agree with Brene because she's asking my opinion, right? I totally agree with Brene Brown when she said, most people are accustomed to not asking for what they want and then complaining for not getting it. And I think that's one of the keys to like my work is say what you want, advocate for yourself. And there's lots of reasons why that can be challenging. So I would say Brene Brown's book is full of a lot of no nonsense, digestible advice for leaders, Dare to Lead. And the last one is not a leadership book or anything like that. It's a series that I just enjoyed. It's Octavia Butler. She is a science fiction writer. She is one of the few African-American science fiction writers. And she has a series called the Xenogenesis series. It's Dawn, Imago, and Adulthood Rights. You can buy them individually. They're great. I've read them many times. Just amazing, entertaining, captivating.
Cool.
Can't put it down. So science fiction and leadership. That's what I'd say.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah, man, I'm interested in all three of those. Well, you can see around me, I'm a voracious reader. Didn't always be that way. Wasn't always that way, but I love part of this section is kind of selfish. Cause I'm like, I want what should I read next? Or what can I add to my reading list? So that's awesome, man. Yes. We'll link to those in the show notes for folks. I'll also link in the show notes how people can get in touch with Jay. So, yeah, man, I would love for folks to be able to connect with you, reach out to you, find you on LinkedIn, do business with you, bring you on and help to transform their companies. So where can people find you? What's the best way to get in touch with Jay?
Two ways. You can go to LinkedIn, James Guilford, James, Guil as in Lima, F as in frog, ORD as in dog. James Guilford on LinkedIn. You'll see me. I'm the Cirque du Soleil guy. You can also email me at jay@coworkslead.com. That's Jay at COWORKSLEAD.com. And just connect to me on LinkedIn. I got a lot of stuff on there. I'm always posting, and I'd love to hear from people.
Awesome. Well, Jay, this has been just phenomenal. I've learned so much. I think our listeners have been really, really helped. So thank you so much for your time today and helping to equip the world for success. It's awesome.
All right. We got it. Thanks a lot for your time. We'll talk soon. I'll see you at the circus.
Yeah, done.
Okay. All right. Talk to you soon, Kyle. All right.
Man, don't you just love Jay's energy? I mean, just talking with him gets me fired up. Love it, love it, love it. Okay, so let's recap what he told us not to do. First, don't use intimidation as a leadership tool. Again, don't use intimidation as a leadership tool. This is a temptation for us that are in leadership roles, whether personally or professionally, to want to be able to bring about our desired results by force, by intimidation, by do this or else, right? And usually that's not going to go so well, right? Remember, we're leading people, not pushing them. In that sense, we want to lead people there, and trying to coerce them into getting it done isn't effective. We're automatically giving up our ground of authority when we try to flex it like that, right? We're actually exercise our authority when we pull and don't push. So don't use intimidation as a leadership tool. Second, don't prize other people's opinions over what's best for you. Again, don't prize other people's opinions over what you know is best for you. So here's the deal. Prizing other people's opinions doesn't mean don't get insight, don't get perspective, etc. What it does mean is be guarded and be filtered, and don't go around asking for too many people's opinions. Don't go around and asking for too many people's help or advice or insight. Not everyone's insight is going to be helpful. Not everyone's insight is going to be applicable, right? And there's a way in which we can be actually really, really insecure, and we're really just seeking affirmation. And that's how we ask everyone we come across and their mom, right? Don't do that. Have a few trusted advisors, and don't worry about other people's opinions. The fleeting fickleness of the crowds. Do the research, do the homework, be confident, know what's best for you. And part of that is that gut feeling, right? It's a feature, not a bug. It's not the whole thing, but it is a feature, not a bug. And don't prize other people's opinions over that. Okay, last but not least, don't avoid the negative. Don't avoid the negative. Pursue the positive. So it seems like, well, you're splitting hairs, Kyle, right? Okay, so there's a difference, and it really has to do with what we focus on, and the reason that that's important is because we become what we behold. We become the things that we set our minds on and upon. So here's the deal. You can just be spending the rest of your life running away from something you're trying to avoid, right? And that's going to take you in a direction. You're going to be running away from the thing you're trying to avoid, and necessarily, by default, you're going to be moving in a different direction. Or you could pursue the positive, right? And by pursuing the positive, it's going to lead you away from the negative, right? So two different things. Here's the deal. If your focus, if your perspective is to just avoid the negative, to run away from the negative, guess what you're thinking about? The negative, right? What if you're thinking like, I don't want to be like my parents. I don't want to be like my parents. I don't want to be like my parents, right? What do you think you're going to end up being like? Your parents. Why? Because that's all you're thinking about. I don't want to be like that person. I don't want to be like this person. I don't want to do this, or I don't want to do that. If that's what's constantly consuming your mind, guess what you're going to do? Guess who you're going to be like? Guess what you're going to become? The thing you don't want to, right? Instead, focus on the positive. Who do you want to become? What do you want to be like? Run there, right? Focus on that and head in that direction, and do it with all your might. So awesome. Don't use intimidation as a leadership tool. Don't prize other people's opinions over what you know is best for you. And last but not least, don't avoid the negative. Pursue the positive. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for listening. This podcast is about you. It's for you, and I couldn't do without you. If this has been helpful for you, share it with a friend. If you're a company that thinks that you've got a relevant message for the community here, and you want to part together in telling your story, reach out to me, and we can consider what that looks like. Well, it's been said that good men learn from their own mistakes, but great men, they learn from the mistakes of others. So go and be great, and we'll see you next time.